Look at these chilling interrogation tapes of Chris Watts, the Colorado man who confessed to killing his family in cold blood. Authorities are now giving us an inside look at the investigation just days after Watts was sentenced to life in prison. Amy here with the details.
That's right, George, and everyone. The tapes revealed just about every key step in this investigation that led to Chris Watts' arrest. But among the most compelling, the recordings of what he said during that police interrogation. For the first time, we are hearing Chris Watts confess to murdering his wife.
I just felt such anger that nothing, I didn't feel anything.
The father of two, seen here with his father in a police interrogation room, blaming the death of the couple's two daughters on his wife, Shanann Watts.
Lost it and choke her. That's rage. I'm bad.
A lie he repeated to investigators.
And the babies are gone. And I put my hands around my wife's neck and did that same thing.
Did Shanann fight back at all?
He would later plead guilty to all three murders. Overnight, the Colorado DA's office releasing dozens of videos from the investigation. The Watts home being searched by police and canines. Surveillance video showing Watts loading items into his truck in the morning after the murder. Later, he's seen showing investigators where to find his family's bodies.
Okay, can you work it for me? Thanks. I think it's the paper. Just can we, is that S for Shanann? Okay, and where are the girls at?
Mm-hmm.
Sydney? Mm-hmm. So which one is, do you know which one?
And drone video of the oil field where the bodies were found. His wife wrapped in sheets from their bed.
Why take their bodies out of the house and bury them?
I was scared. I didn't know what else to do.
Prosecutors say he was having an affair with a coworker and wanted a, quote, fresh start.
She almost let me told her about her confirm one. I didn't tell her.
Colorado mornings have a quiet kind of beauty, the kind that makes you believe nothing truly dark could exist behind closed doors. But inside the Watts household, behind the neatly painted walls and perfectly trimmed lawns, something unsettling had already begun to grow. Chris Watts, the man neighbors described as gentle and reserved, carried an emptiness behind his eyes that most people overlooked. Friends saw a family that looked picture perfect, yet the truth simmered beneath the surface like a storm waiting for the right moment to break. Shanann, always filled with energy and determination, noticed the shift long before anyone else. Chris had become distant, emotionally blank. He'd smile without warmth, nod without listening, and speak in short, calculated sentences. She confided in close friends about the growing silence between them, a silence so heavy it felt like another presence living in the house. But no one could have imagined how deep that darkness truly ran. Even neighbors recall fleeting moments that didn't sit right. Chris standing alone in the driveway late at night, staring out into nothing. His sudden weight loss, his abrupt changes in routine, his eyes never quite meeting theirs when they spoke to him. The kind of subtle red flags that only make sense after everything falls apart. As these early warning signs floated unnoticed through the air, life continued as usual. Birthday videos were filmed. Family trips were taken. Smiles were posted online. But behind every captured moment was a man slipping further from reality, crafting a version of himself that the world was meant to believe. And as we begin unraveling these hidden cracks, these small moments that foreshadowed a nightmare no one saw coming, remember, subscribe to Nightfall Detective so you never miss the truths lurking in the shadows. The real story is only just beginning. The morning Shanann and the children were reported missing felt strangely off from the very beginning. It was a kind of stillness that didn't match the urgency of a mother who should have been home with her girls. When Chris opened the door for officers, his expression was carefully arranged, too calm, too controlled, like someone performing a role he'd rehearsed. His voice lacked the tremor you'd expect from a frightened husband. Instead, he repeated the same lines again and again, as if memorized, hoping the uniformed men around him wouldn't notice how carefully he was trying to steer the narrative. Neighbors watched from their doorways, confused. They'd seen Chris the previous night, quietly walking back and forth from his truck at a time he usually slept. Now he paced the living room, arms crossed tightly over his chest, offering explanations no one asked for. Officers sensed something was wrong. They noted how he talked more about what he had done that morning than about the missing children. He avoided looking at the empty bedrooms. He avoided looking at Shanann's phone on the couch, left behind in a place she would never abandon it. As detectives pressed him with simple questions, Chris's answers came too quickly, too smoothly. His attempts to appear cooperative felt almost theatrical, as though he believed sincerity could be imitated with the right tone. On camera, he begged for their safe return, but even through the screen, something about his eyes didn't match his words. For the first time, cracks in his composure began to show, small, but unmistakable to trained investigators. And as this day unfolded, each lie he told became another thread unraveling from the fabric of his story. If you're following the clues with us, go ahead and hit the like button. Every moment from here on reveals something darker. The investigation was only beginning to tighten its grip around him. From the moment investigators stepped into the case, Chris Watts began deploying quiet tactics, subtle, almost invisible maneuvers meant to keep suspicion drifting anywhere but toward him. These weren't the loud, frantic lies of someone panicking. They were calm, calculated, and designed to make him seem like the worried husband he desperately wanted everyone to believe he was. But beneath that calm mask, his strategies revealed more than he intended. He used over-explanation as a shield, adding unnecessary details to make his story feel complete. He pretended to recall timelines with confidence, even though his eyes flickered every time an officer repeated a question. He inserted small emotional pauses in his speech, almost like he was mimicking how a grieving man might talk, only he did it with the precision of someone practicing a script, not living a nightmare. One of his most disturbing tactics was subtle blame shifting. Instead of focusing on finding Shanann and the children, he began suggesting they might have left on their own. He carefully framed Shanann as emotional or not feeling well, planting seeds that something unstable had pushed her to act out of character. It was a quiet attempt to redirect suspicion without ever raising his voice. He also tried to distance himself physically and mentally from the crime scene. He avoided standing near the bedrooms. He lingered around officers as if staying close would make him seem transparent. He used soft tones, nodding often, smiling nervously, trying to appear harmless, approachable, trustworthy. But detectives are trained to see through masks like his. They recognize the rehearsed lines, the emotional imitation, the artificial calmness. What he thought were clever tactics only exposed the cracks in his story. Share this video with someone who studies human behavior. This is a case where every whispered lie mattered. And stay with Nightfall Detectives, the unraveling has only just begun. Inside the interrogation room, the air felt heavier than anywhere else in the investigation. It's a small space, but its silence has a way of stripping people down, exposing every tremor, every misplaced breath. Chris Watts walked in with that same quiet smile he'd practiced in front of cameras, but the detectives had already seen beneath it. They had been watching him closely, his posture, his hesitations, the moments when his carefully rehearsed calm slipped for just a second too long. At first, he tried to maintain the act. He folded his hands neatly in front of him, spoke softly, and repeated his timeline as though reading it from memory. But detectives noticed how he kept avoiding eye contact whenever the subject shifted to Shanann. They caught the stiffness in his shoulders when they mentioned the girls' names. His answers became shorter, his breathing shallower. The room was working on him. Then came the turning point, the moment investigators presented evidence he couldn't explain away. Small inconsistencies became glaring gaps. His phone data contradicted his story. A neighbor's camera exposed movements he swore never happened. And when detectives gently told him they could see he wasn't being honest, the mask slipped. His jaw tightened. His voice cracked. His hands shook against the tabletop. The questioning technique shifted, subtle pressure, empathy, silence used like a mirror. Chris tried to cling to the lies, but each one fell apart under its own weight. His defenses crumbled, piece by piece, as though the truth was pushing its way out whether he liked it or not. If you're still with us in this tense moment, remember to subscribe to Nightfall Detectives. This is where the real unraveling begins, where a carefully built facade collapses under the weight of undeniable truth. The final cracks were forming. And soon, everything would break. When the truth finally surfaced, it did not arrive in a dramatic outburst or a moment of explosive confession. It came quietly, like everything else Chris Watts had done. After hours of interrogation, after the mask had shattered and his story collapsed under its own contradictions, he sat still, staring at the table as if the truth had been waiting there the whole time. His voice was small when he spoke, almost detached, as though the monstrous act he described belonged to someone else entirely. But detectives knew they had crossed the threshold. The facade was gone. What came next was the unraveling, details so chilling they echoed through the room long after his words faded. He talked about the moments no one saw, the darkness he had hidden, the choices he made that defied all logic and humanity. The investigators listened in stunned silence, not out of disbelief, but because the truth revealed a level of coldness they rarely encountered. And as he spoke, a disturbing calm washed over him, the kind that made professionals question what level of emptiness existed in the man sitting before them. In the aftermath, psychological experts would analyze his behavior, searching for explanations that never fully arrived. Interviews from prison revealed a man who seemed more fascinated by how people perceived him than by the gravity of what he had done. The community struggled to reconcile the friendly neighbor they once knew with the person behind bars. Friends and family pieced together memories, noticing signs they had missed, moments that now seemed too dark to ignore. Cases like this leave lingering questions that fade but never truly disappear. And as we close this investigation, remember to like, share, and subscribe to Nightfall Detectives. There are still stories hidden in the shadows, waiting to be uncovered. The truth, after all, is rarely what it seems.